Modeling is one of the oldest art forms. Some of the earliest known relics include religious figurines and children's toys. Today, there is no difference. The applications for sculpting remain vast. Philippe has developed his modeling skills by experimenting with the creation of figurines, dolls, portraits, bronzes, and monuments. Philippe's training began in France as a woodcarver at a very early age, but he's always loved working in clay. He was finally able to develop his professional sculpting and teaching career once he came to the United States. From the many students he has had, Philippe has been able to observe a pattern of mistakes common to every beginner. The goal of this video is to provide a step-by-step method of construction that is easy to follow. Philippe chooses to work with water-based clay, the oldest medium available. From his clay sculpt, he can continue the process to achieve different finished products in various materials such as wax, plaster, porcelain, bronze, resin, or vinyl. However, regardless of the material of the finished piece, the beginning is always the same.
These are the tools I use. They are a mix of homemade tools and tools available at art supply stores. Today I'll be sculpting a little girl's head. To start, I take a ball of paper that I put on the dowel, and I put some tape around to secure it to the dowel. I make sure that the paper is not attached to the dowel so I can turn it freely without having to worry about turning the stand. The first step will be to just wrap some clay around the paper. What I try to do at the beginning is to get a symmetrical shape, like a light bulb. By turning it like this, I will see if it's symmetrical or not. By using the scraper, I can move the clay around very easily. And I take a slab of clay and I make it round like this and hollow, that I will put on the back of the head like this. I don't put it down here or up there, just at a 45-degree angle. And I blend it in. You can use the scraper to blend the back of the head with the light bulb. Then you take a little rectangle like this, a piece of clay that you put at the forehead like this, and you blend it in again. Use the scraper. I like working with the earthenware clay because the consistency changes as you work with it. At the beginning it's very soft, so you can build up the big volumes very fast, and as it dries a little bit, it will become easier to work on details. Very important to look at the head from the top. You'll notice that the back of the head is very round and it tapers toward the front. This shape is very important at the beginning. When looking at your piece from behind, you should have a perfect round. And when you look at the profile, you should have this curve sliding down toward the front. On the back, you have a depression at the base of the skull. You use it to draw a line to position the jaw. Then you take a piece of clay that is a little bit narrow at each end and fat in the center. I try to always use the same shape so you get used to it and it avoids mistakes. Adapt it to the size of your head. Taking this, if you curve it and put it right on the line like this and put some pressure to it, you form the jawbone. Looking at it from the profile, this line here should be vertical and straight. You can draw the end of the jawbone that comes about 2/3 back. Put your hands like this, and with the palm of your hand, make sure that it tapers as a triangle, like this. Here is a mistake I see very often. People have a tendency to put this piece here and leave a hollow at the center like this. And you don't want this. Also, to make the jaw protruding, which is not what you want at the beginning. So make sure that if you don't have enough clay in the center, take a little bit and put it right down here to make sure that this line is straight. A good way to check for the right shape is to drag your fingers like this across, and it should be perfectly round. You should feel it round. If there is any flat spot, just drag the clay to obtain this round part. Clean your tools as often as you can. We are going to start with a skull, a basic skull. We are not going to go in very details, but it's important to know the basics. So in order to find the right proportion, I draw two lines. I start in the center and I draw a vertical line. Then I go from this point to the lower chin to find the middle that I will just mark. Depending on the edge of the sculpture you're working on, this will determine where to put the eye sockets. If it were an adult, we would probably do the eye socket at this level here. For a child, however, we're going to start a little bit lower. So we start right underneath the line, and gently I pull some clay out like this, and I use the leftover clay to draw the cheekbones. The eye sockets have a very definite shape. They look a little bit like those glasses, the Ray-Ban glasses. They're like a triangle with a vertical line, horizontal line, and an angle here. Notice the size of the eye sockets. They take a lot of volume. In the center, I make sure that I leave about ½ an inch for life-size head. And with my thumb, I just push the inside a little bit. Like this. So when you look at the profile, it gives you the bridge here. The next step will be to put just a teeny bit of clay on the profile like this to draw the bone, the nasal bone. Make sure that this is round. This radius is much tighter than this one. Here, by pushing here a little bit and pulling this out, I'll draw the brow bone. The temples, just the palm of your hands, and push a little bit. At this point, the clay is very soft, so you can see that we can move it and get it symmetrical. Turn the head a lot. Check the profile as often as you can think of. Even though it's not necessary to have this smooth, by doing it, you may be able to notice some mistakes, especially in the symmetry of the skull. Of course, this is not anatomically complete skull, but it will help to have this right at the beginning. Now, it's very good practice to sculpt a skull completely until you get the whole bone structure right, and use it later on for reference. Now you can smooth this a little bit. Like this. The child nose consists of 4 different parts. You have a big ball in the center, 2 little balls, one on each side, and the bridge. Oftentimes the bridge is very flat, so look at it from the profile. In order to get this easily, I start with the basics. The 3 little balls that I'm going to put on. I'm going to put one at the bottom, like this. And I'm going to put the 2 little ones, one on each side. Like this. Now, you notice they are at the same level at the base as the base of this bone. I see oftentimes students putting these too high like this. It doesn't work, so make sure that you do this correctly. Put a little bit of pressure so they stick. Like this. Then you take a thin piece of clay. Make sure that you flatten this clay with the tip of your fingers. If you do it with the palm of your hand, it will dry the clay, and when you put it on, it will crack. It has to be fairly thin. You take it and you put it over the nose like this, and you follow the contour of what is underneath. If it's a little bit low, just shift it upward. Blend the clay that's left over with the rest of the head. Then take this tool, a wooden tool, and just push the nostrils in. You can refine each side. Of course, you will have to check your model. I like to use either photographs, or the best thing would be a life model. Of course, with a child, it's difficult to keep them still, so you want to make sure to have plenty of photographs to get back on. Check the profile. You will notice that the nose looks too big. One of the reasons is what you have now is just a skull with just the nose sticking out of it. There is no flesh around, so it will always look a little bit big. If you make it too small at the beginning, you will have to add more clay later on. So keep it in mind when you do the nose. The next step is to put the upper lip. I always start the mouth with the upper lip. I use a very definite shape, which is very fat in the center and narrow at each end, a little bit like we did the jaw. By putting the right amount of clay and the right shape, I end up with the volume where I want them. So I put this on right underneath the nose, and I push the ends like this to get this radius to be tight. Then I take a tool, I clean it, make sure that it's slick. I put my thumb under the mouth and I push the philtrum first. Then I slice some clay off on each side, like this, and then I just push with my thumb here and here to give me the upper lip. It will need to be refined later, but the volumes are distributed the way I want them. If you look at the profile, it looks very weird. Here are some mistakes I see very often. Sometimes people make this part too hollow here. So this sticks out too much. You have to make sure that the sides here are planes. Use the tool with a slight angle like this to give this surface a nice angle. And push here. When you do this part with your thumbs, don't push too hard because the lips have a roundness that you will have to add later if you push too hard. The lower lip starts the same way as the upper lip. Oftentimes it's a little bit smaller. Of course, that changes a little bit depending on the model. What you'll do here, you'll curve the lower lip a little bit like this, and you put it on. Put some pressure. And blend this in at the bottom with your thumb. Come back with the tool and press the corners. Inside like this. Keep the lip nice and round. You need this volume on each side. It will look too big. Once again, it's because you don't have the rest of the face to match these features. Here is the profile. Always go back to the profile. Let me show you some of the mistakes I see very often with the mouth. I'm going to rip it off and do it again in a different way. The most common mistake I see is students not pushing the corners inside. They put the mouth on like this. And they smooth it without pushing the corners or defining the shape of the lips. What you have to do is use the edge of your thumb to shape the lip like this, and the tool to push the corners. Notice the angle of my tool. And use the edge of your thumb again like this to define the lip. Now we are going to put the chin first and the cheeks. It's very important at this time to pay attention to every angle. You have to look at your work from 3/4, profile, front, and same on the other side. Pay attention to the symmetry. You will notice that I didn't get in many details on the mouth, nose so far, because I think that it's a mistake to go too far. Let's say the nose or the mouth is not exactly at the right spot. You might end up having to move it. So don't spend too much time on each feature until you have the all volumes and the all features all together. To do the chin, I just put a ball of clay like this, and I work from the profile. I go here and I look at it from the profile where I want the chin to end. Then when I found the line I want, then I work from here. I keep this line in and do the sides. I rough it in like this, and I'll start on the cheeks. On a child, there is a fair amount of volume, so don't hesitate to put it in. It also goes low enough here. There is always, on children, kind of a puffiness right here. One of the mistakes I see very often is people looking at it from the front and forgetting to look at it from the profile, and they end up having these two hollow like this. The cheeks are going very far back, so don't forget to build up all the way to the end of the jawbone. You can take as much time as you want doing this, adding a little bit of clay at a time or big volume. The clay is very soft still, so you can move it like this. Try to find the symmetry. Put some fat at the bottom of the eye socket here, going up on the nose. I try to always use fresh clay. Don't use clay when it starts drying. Scrap of clay, just dismiss them. You don't need them. You need the clay to flow under your fingers. When you get to points that are critical, use a tool. Your fingers can't go everywhere on the face, so you have to find the right tool. The corner of the mouth needs to be recessed from the cheeks. If you pay attention to the way I use the tool here, I try to push it in deep enough so it creates a depression just at the corner. Add the clay like this. What I do oftentimes is I take clay in my fingers like this and always pull it the same way. So little by little you develop the skill to always take the same volume of clay, so you don't even have to look at what you're doing. You just take the clay, it's always the same. Be careful of the symmetry. Sometimes to check on the symmetry of the head, I will take a mirror and look at it in the mirror, and oftentimes I will notice differences that I couldn't see looking at it from the front. There is a little bit of clay to be added on each side here. There is a muscle around the mouth called the orbicularis oris that forms this little puffiness on each side here. Now, I will pretend that I made this mistake on purpose and tell you that when the chin sticks out a little bit too much, there is a way to fix it without redoing everything you've done. So let me show you an easy way to fix the mistake. To fix the profile, the best way to do it is to come with a wire and slice off fairly high like this and take a wedge off like this. You remove it. And here you have total control over the profile. If you need to push it in, Just push it in like this until you get the profile you want. The advantage is you don't have to change any of the work you've done earlier, and it gives you very good control without destroying anything. Here it is, like this, and all you have to do then is put some clay in it, in the wedge here. And in few seconds, you were able to fix a major structural problem. And that works well for many different parts of the work. Let's say you want to change the forehead a little bit, make it more developed. You can do the same thing. You can slice it here, either push it out or push it in, depending on the mistakes you've made. Don't be afraid to change things, to experiment. Now I'm a little bit more satisfied with the profile the way it stands now. The first step for the eyes will be to fill up the eye socket, the upper part of the eye socket. The fatty part over the eyelid has to be put on first. I will use a definite shape, which is a teardrop shape, and you will see why. By putting the teardrop, the thin part inside, like this, I will shape the fatty part and the eyebrow. Use the edge of your thumb to shape the eyebrow. If you need a little bit more clay, add it on. This part here is very puffy. The mistake I see very often is people pushing this inside like this. Then it defies the purpose. What you want is this part to be around like this. You feel the round. Like this. After that, I will put the eyeball inside. Same on the other side. It's a good idea to do both eyes at the same time so you are sure of the distance. The rule is you should have enough room in between the eyes to fit the length of another eye. I'm going to add a teeny bit more clay just at the cheekbone. On each side. Then I take the tool and I push in the corners, the tear duct, and I use the rest of the clay to shape the eyelid. Let's demonstrate the eye, the anatomy of the eye a little bit further before we continue. Take a piece of clay, make a nice ball. Take a slab of clay and you put it on the ball you just made, like this, to shape the eye. The reason for this is to understand the curvature of the eye. The eye is round in two ways. It's round this way here, but also this way. There are a few rules that are very useful when sculpting an eye. Let's say this is the tear duct side. The tear duct is always a little bit lower than the outside corner of the eye, so make sure you check. Another thing, it's the rule of the third. If you divide the eye in three parts, this part here, starting from the tear duct, should be the highest part visible of the eyeball. And this one should be the lowest part to give you an aesthetic eye. If you take a diagonal, it goes like this. This is the highest point, this is the lowest point. Try to pay attention to this angle. There is about a 15-degree angle between the lower lid and the upper lid. If you look at the profile, make sure that the lower lid is recessed from the upper lid. I know that it's difficult for most people, but try to train your left hand to work as well as your right hand. Because when you work on the left side, you're a little bit handicapped if you can't switch hand. The way I do it is I put my finger on the head like this to hold the tool steady. I use the flat part of the tool to give me the round of the eyeball. It takes a long time to refine the eye. Take your time. Make sure that both eyes are the same size. Don't hesitate to add a little bit of clay to take some off. Like in this corner, I need a little bit more. I take some with the point of my tool and add some clay little by little. Now it's time, in my opinion, to get a little bit more finish on the piece before you go further, to make sure you don't see any big mistakes. What I do is I put a little bit of water on my thumbs and I go over the whole surface. To refine it further, you can use a brush to go over the surface like that. It gives a teeny bit of texture, helps you to see the volumes a little bit better. Go over the forehead. It is not too late to make any modification necessary. If you need more forehead, just add a little bit of clay. If you need more cheeks, don't hesitate. Here you can also use the scraping tool. I bend the tool in my hands like this to get the shape right. You go in a crisscross fashion like this to get rid of the big bumps. I will now work on the iris. I like to do that at some point to give more life to the sculpt. I use a wire tool just to define the iris. Use your left hand if you need to. You have to step away from it to make sure that they are at the right level. If you are too close, it might end up being a little bit cross-eyed. This is a portrait of my daughter, and she has clear eyes. So to give the illusion of clear eyes, I will try to get the iris to be pretty shallow. If I wanted to do darker eyes, I would dig out a fair amount of clay to give the illusion of darker eyes. Now that I have the iris in place, I will try to define the pupil. There are many ways to do that. I like to do half a circle. At this point, the clay is too soft to give too much detail, so just give the outline and let it dry a little bit. In a couple of hours, this will be hardened enough that you can refine it with just a brush and a little bit of water. Can refine a little bit around the eyes too. And we'll get back to the finish and more details about the texture and fine tuning a little bit later. Right now, I think we're going to start on the ears. Always check the profile. The placement of the ear is very important. If the ear is too high, it will change the whole impression of the base of the face. If it's too low, it will do the opposite. If it's too far out from the face, it will look like the face is too narrow. So try to pay special attention to the placement. The way I do it is I go halfway from the distance of the tip of the nose and the back of the head. And I draw a line, a vertical line. Then I go from the tip of the eyebrow to the base of the nose. And the ear goes in this spot right here. There's a slight angle. I prepare a wedge. What I do is basically I give the shape of the ear before I put it on. If you look at it on profile, it is narrow here and fat here. The shape is a little bit the shape of the kidney bean, like this. You take it and put it where it belongs, on the back of the line, and give a slight angle. And then you press this spot here, and you shape the outside of the ear. The ear, in my opinion, is separated in 5 different parts. The lobe, the helix, the concha, which is the depression here, the anti-helix, that is this spot here following the contour, and the tragus that starts here and ends in this spot. Once you understand all these spots, you should be able to place them properly. It's a good idea to place both ears before you get too far. You have to check the height, looking at it from the front, and the placement in proportion to the front of the face, looking at it from above. Once you have the 2 ears where they belong, then you can start working on the details. Take the tool here and define the outside of the ear, going all the way inside with the helix. Go down, form the lobe a little bit. Smooth around, like this. Take a wire tool like this and follow the edge and remove just a little coil of clay, stopping right at the lobe. To define the concha, take a bigger wire tool and remove the inside. The tragus sticks out a little bit here. Just form it gently. It also it's prolonged here, going around the lobe. The helix dies down right inside the concha. At the top of the anti-helix, there is a slight depression here. You can shape like this. My daughter's has ears that stick out a little bit at the top. So I will separate the top just enough that when I look at it from the front, I find the shape I'm looking for. The easiest way to clean the inside and get it finished is by using a brush with a little bit of water and smoothing the edges, rounding off the entire helix and the contour of the tragus, like here. If the clay is too soft, just give it half an hour to dry. And then you can go back to it very easily. The back of the handle of a brush used like this works very well too. The back of the ear is very important. Give it a little bit of thought, and you kind of have to observe people and anatomy, and it will come very easily. The most common mistakes I see with the ears. First is the placement. People have a tendency to put the ear a little bit too forward. You have to measure it in order to get it right. The height, sometimes you look at the sculpt from the face and you will see differences in height. So pay especially attention to the height and the distance from the front. And the biggest problem I see is the helix not going inside the concha. For some reason people forget about it or don't understand the process. It kind of wraps around and goes inside. Don't make it come outside. The tragus is not very big, but it has to be defined, and it wraps around the lower part of the concha. For those of you who want to make a doll out of your sculpt, I prepared this one as a sample. This is just a portrait of my youngest daughter. You have different options for the neck. When you go with a baby like this, you want a flange neck, which you do by flattening the bottom like this and holding a tool. You just remove a slight band of clay, and to finish it, I use a brush. I like this groove to be deep enough to hold the fabric when you do a cloth body. Just have to come back, smooth everything. Till you get this as clean as you want. Here I will probably later on cut this at this level here to reduce the amount of porcelain needed for the head. Right now I will show you the ball joint neck that might be used for older dolls or people who want to use a shoulder plate. This is a doll called Luna I did last year. It's the prototype, and I chose on this one to do a ball joint. What I did was rounding the base of the neck, I remove it from the stand, turn it around, fill up the hole left by the dowel, and round it very nicely, fit it in a shoulder plate that I did in order to get a movable head. It's a good time to start putting on shoulders. In order for the clay to attach to itself without any problem, I just put a little bit of moisture around the neck. What I want to do now is start building the shoulders very slowly. Because this clay I'm putting on is very soft, if I put the whole block at once, it will have a tendency to sag. So what I'll do is I will start adding a little bit of the shoulders, and later on today I'll add a little bit more, and so on. Put some pressure. Place the hair, you have to find the shape of the mass of hair. So you can draw it in to make it easier for you. Go here, she has bangs, so I'm going to try to find the right shape to start with. So I start with the shape starting from the lines, going from the line I draw here to the front. And I start by just giving the general shape. Here I'm going to put a hairband. So I use a gouge just to trace it. At this time, I like to decide the attitude. So what I do, if I want the shoulder to be a little bit higher, I just push the clay since it's still very soft. In this case, I'd like the head to be tilted a little bit, like this. And you can try to find the attitude by moving things around. The shoulders now are built a little bit more. If you want the base to be bigger, just add some clay at this point, or you can even wait a little bit, it doesn't matter. You can do this thing last. The collarbone have a definite shape. It starts in the center here, goes up to the beginning of the shoulder. On kids, it's not as developed, you can't see it as much. So just go gentle, just put them in with your fingers, but by just pressing underneath and above, and the neck muscles, just with the tip of your fingers. Now that the clay is a little bit drier on the face, I can start working on the texture and refining the details. I go back with a brush like this to give a little bit of texture that catches the light and give me a better idea of where I have to work. To define the mouth a little bit better, I clean a brush handle and I give a little bit of a ridge around the lip, the lower lip, going from the edge up. And for the upper lip, from the edge down. Use the soft brush to smooth the lips. Here I would like a little bit more expression in the eyes. So in order to give a very small, a faint smile, I will add a little bit of clay just at the bottom part of the eyelid, in front of the pupil. And I will try to lift the corner of the mouth just a little bit. The clay is still very soft, so it's a good time to check every little detail. Like here I can notice that one eye is a little bit recessed. One way to fix it is to come from the inside by pushing the tool inside, and then I can move the corner until it's where I want it, like this. And then all it takes is to plug this hole. to get it back to what you want. But here now, the eyes, I'm more satisfied with the way it looks. It's all very little details that you're gonna learn how to find. I use this edge, this little point here, to give the shape of the hair by going with the flow of hair with just this little corner. I find it very useful. I separate the tip. And once the shape of the hair is the way you want it, you can use a brush to go over it very lightly. And then to give it a kind of a shine, I come back in little places like this, just give a little bit of a slick look. It's a good idea to learn how to work everywhere at one time now. Instead of focusing on one point, one feature, try to go over the whole thing so you don't emphasize a mistake. Move around. To refine the ears when they are a little bit drier, I go with a brush, a fan brush, and just go inside like this. Refine the ear with a fan brush and try to give a little bit of texture. The fan brush takes the edges off and round every little detail. To define the eyebrows, I use the scraper tool and just apply the edge along the brow bone. When I do the finish, the texture, I like to leave a little bit of roughness to the sculpt. There are many ways to finish it. You can have a very smooth surface or just a little bit of grain like I'm doing now, or even more if you choose to. There is a lot of time to be spent on the finishing depending how picky you are. After finishing the piece, when you're satisfied with the sculpt, you have different options. On this piece, probably after working a little bit more on the finish, I will hollow it out to prepare it for the firing. When finished with the sculpt, you have many options. One of them is just to let the clay dry. Like when I work on just a study like this little boy, I don't bother firing anything. It will last a very long time. I suppose eventually it will deteriorate, but just for a study it works pretty good. If you want to keep the piece without going through the trouble of making a mold, you can hollow out the piece and fire it, and it will give you a pinkish finish where you can put patina on. If you want to go further in the process, you can make a rubber mold like this one that is used in the process of making a wax to do a bronze. This is a more involved method, but the result can be very interesting.
There are as many methods of sculpting as there are those who sculpt. However, every beginner needs a foundation before building his own style. The techniques Philippe has demonstrated today are the product of many years of teaching. His classes, which include mold making, are available throughout the country and at his New York studio.